All right. This is not something I usually do. I will not deny that. But this was something I got a little excited about, actually, after a really terrific game last night, playing some ESR. I happened to pop on and see Mr. Wargaming's video. Actually, I saw it this morning, I think, concerning his campaign. Now, he had reached out to me and asked, and I actually reached out to him, I should say. I got that wrong. I reached out to him and I said, hey, would you like, if the group over here at the Armchair Dragoons were to play out one of your campaign battles? For those who don't know, he does a lot of campaign thinking, a lot of fantasy campaign gaming, and wanted to come up with a way to do a fantasy campaign and also to resolve the battles in that campaign. And now he has posted a video saying that he's a little stuck and he's a little concerned about particularly one set of rules that I'm very fond of, Dragon Rampant, one of the Blue Book games from Osprey. And watching his video and thinking about his video, I said, wait a minute, there is an answer here, and I think we can find that answer. So let's go to where I always go, which is Tabletop Simulator. So let's start. He had sent me the forces that he wanted to do in the battle, and so I've built them here using a mix of figures from a number of sets that I own. And he told me that this was to be... Now, and what I decided to do, I said, look, Dragon Rampant is a point-based system. It is one of those systems that has evolved in the latter part of our wargaming history, certainly over the 40 years I've been playing, that focuses on creating war bands, that focuses on creating things by points. And therefore, it's driven that way, and it's intended to keep the figure count down and keep the tabletop space minimal. But that does not mean you can't get bigger battles out of the system. That is disproved, that notion is disproved by the fact that we here on Saturday Night Fights played a huge game of Isandlwana, based on the Men Who Would Be Kings, which is in the same system, with a few tweaks offered to us by the great folks at Little Wars TV. And that really inspired me to think of a system that I know Mr. Wargaming likes an awful lot, and that's Chainmail, the classic Chainmail by Gary Gygax that is so much a part of the lore of Dungeons & Dragons and the history of our hobby. And one of its premises is that you can play Chainmail at a 1-to-1 skirmish ratio, or you can play it at 1-to-20, assuming that one figure is 20 men on the field. And that's what you see here. He gave me his counts for the forces of the Empire, and there's the Emperor hanging out right there, Emperor Meltzer. Let's go see him. Ooh, he looks very nice. And in the rules for Dragon Rampant, he has to be part of a unit, so he is. And we see here the 1, 2, 3 units of elite riders. We see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units of elite foot. And we see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 units of heavy foot. Each one figure representing 20 real men. And that's how this comes out. You'll notice this is the tally sheet. Forces the Empire, elite riders, 6 points each, 18 points. Elite, you'll see it, it adds up. And you'll notice that it adds up to 72 men. Or 72 points. That actually happens to be 3 even war bands in Chain of Command. That's what I play a lot of. In Dragon Rampant. And so it turns out rather neatly that way. So let's take a look at the Orcs. He told me to do the same thing. And we have our head bad orc. I haven't named him yet, but he's right there. On a chariot with a bunch of elite chariot riders. Don't they look savage? Let's get a look from the front. Don't they look just grand? They look really cool. These are a little over 30 millimeter figures, by the way, in case you're wondering. So we've got these heavy riders right here. These elite riders, I should say. Over here we've got some heavy riders. And then we've got some warg fellers. These are your light riders. Some light troops. And then in the back we have the heavy orc infantry, the mainstay of any nasty orky army. There they are, looking suitably ready for battle. And you'll spot something over here that we're a little short on points. And that's, we only have, you do up the math, we're about 1 warband short. This winds up being just that little bit short. I assumed that the heavy foot would get the offensive trait, because frankly they are. And we gave the light foot short range missiles rather than bows, which increased their value just a little bit. So again, we have this army, and I realized, oh yeah, you are short, because if you look at the totals that I was sent, they're a little short in actual troops. But these come very, very close. I had to tweak a little bit, but these come very, very close to the numbers that I was given. And Then you say, well, how do we track casualties? Because that's the question that we were put. And it's actually not that complex. One of the things that Dragon Rampant does that's somewhat different from the other games in the system is allow you to track what amount to hit points or strength points. It's initially represented, you could do it this way, by the number of figures in the unit. So this one would have 12, and this one over here would have 6. This would have 12, these would have 6. But instead, you can also use these little casualty markers. Each one of those markers represents one of the casualties. Each one of the men represents 20 men. So every strength point you lose represents 20 men killed or wounded or wandered away. And we're going to get to that distinction in just a second. In addition, the games of Dragon Rampant are not fights to the death. There are courage tests that have to be taken, and it is quite possible for a unit to run away long before it has lost its last man. And so you keep track, and it's not that hard again. We would certainly, if this works out, we would follow how many fellows are killed and wounded in each one of the units. And then once the battle is over, we'd make that determination. How you decide exactly how many killed and wounded, there's a lot of systems, and I was thinking about this, and I want to tell you about two of my favorites. Probably the simplest is that from Chain of Command, the game from Two Fat Lardies, and you say, wait a minute, how is that possible? That's a skirmish level game, man for man. It's about percentages. We know that every man who dies, if you will, or is a casualty on the tabletop battlefield isn't dead. He can't be. There's far too many men that are wounded, that wandered off, or maybe they just scampered away. Heaven knows some of those light orc troops, they just might not want to stick around if things go badly given their situation. So what do? They've got this chart. This is the after the battle chart. How many figures did they lose? In this case, how many strength points? A certain number never return. A certain number will miss the next game. Now, that could be a day, a week, a month, depending on how you want to structure your campaign. And a certain will immediately return to duty and be ready for battle the next time. And it creates a very elegant, very simple ratio. So if a given unit loses 6 men, for example, we see that 3 are dead for good, and they'll have to be permanent casualties. Then the 2 will miss the next game, and 1 will return for duty immediately, and eventually 3 will come back, so it'll be 50-50. That casualty ratio strikes me as about right, to tell you the truth. But in addition, let's talk about something a little bit more elaborate, and that is my beloved Flight of the Eagle. Now, this is Napoleonic, and there are many combat systems that this thing has. It's got 3, actually. And I rarely play the expert one, but it does have something that's worth noting, and that's this creature. If this is something you want to build into your... And by the way, the Flight of the Eagle, which, as I say, I love very, very much, is a system that allows you to fight a huge operational Napoleonic campaign over many, many days. It's a Kriegspiel. And it's in map and table. It has no figures. It has a link to a figure system. But we certainly don't play it. But it's intended to monitor some of these things that we're talking about here right now. And what it has is a system not only for, the combat itself, which you can see right up here, but it also has, you'll see, a system of pursuit. Some extra casualties can be sustained if you've got more cavalry than your opponent. You run them down, you drive them down. That's something you can think about. But here's the chart I really wanted to get at. 3 and 10 are dead. 4 and 10 are heavily wounded. 3 and 10 are lightly wounded. And, you sort of go through this. I love this one. This 3 and 10 are lightly wounded. Their destiny depends on the outcome of the battle, meaning if you won, you're more likely to get them back. And again, here with these numbers, we would extrapolate this back. So, for example, let's say this unit were to lose 6 men. We would say that unit has lost 120 men, 6 times 20, 120. And then we would determine that of that 120, 3 and 10 are dead, 4 and 10 are heavily wounded, and it'll have to be somehow cared for over a longer period, and 3 and 10 are lightly wounded. So that's actually not that different from what we see over in the Two Fat Lardies system. And you can be as elaborate with this as you want. Now, does this mean that at certain times a unit will not have a full warband? Of course it does. That's the case right here. This is an uneven battle, so what? I mean, the fact is that there's a situation where the orcs have found themselves at a numerical disadvantage. And they're going to have to deal with that. But I think there's an option here. I think there is a way of playing this out. But in any event, as you can see, we've already got the soldiers built. We'll have the battle. and we'll see what the results are. So I think it's a fascinating challenge. It's something I've long been interested in. I'm glad to see all kinds of folks playing these simple rule sets, but also seeking to link them into campaigns. Anyway, always a pleasure to hang out with you. Thanks for watching the video. Go check out Mr. Wargaming stuff. It's absolutely fascinating. And in the meanwhile,